There comes a moment in life when the weight of what has been done to you presses so heavily upon your heart that you begin to wonder if you will ever feel whole again. You did not ask for this pain. You did not sign up for betrayal. You did not imagine that the people you trusted most would become the very hands that tore you apart. And yet, here you are, standing in the aftermath of a storm you never deserved, looking at the pieces of what used to be your life scattered around you. It is not just the loss that aches, but the knowledge that it was caused by someone who could have chosen differently, but didn't. Perhaps you have tried to reason with it. Perhaps you have lain awake at night, replaying every conversation, wondering where the shift began, searching for the moment their loyalty turned cold, when their heart turned away from you. And perhaps the hardest truth is realizing that you may never get those answers, because some betrayals are not born from your failures, but from the emptiness inside the betrayer. That emptiness cannot be filled by your love, your kindness, or your sacrifice. But I must tell you this, your story does not end here. The God who saw the wound being delivered, the God who heard every silent cry you whispered in the darkness, is not going to leave you in this place of breaking. In His wisdom, He allows certain seasons to end, sometimes violently, sometimes painfully, so that the next season can be born out of the ashes. You may feel as though you are standing on barren ground right now, but even the most lifeless soil can become fertile when heaven sends the rain. There is something sacred about being broken before God. The world will tell you that strength is in standing tall, in never falling apart, but heaven knows that strength is often found on your knees, with your hands open and your heart surrendered. It is here, when you have nothing left to prove, nothing left to lose, that God can do His deepest work. For the same God who allows the breaking also promises the rebuilding. And what He builds after the breaking is not fragile. It is not temporary. It is not easily shaken. This betrayal you endured is not wasted. Every tear you shed is a seed. Every lonely night is a turning of the soil. And every moment you choose to keep trusting God, even when you don't understand, is the watering of that seed. In due time, the seed will break open, life will push through the dirt, and you will see the beginning of a new season, not just of recovery, but of restoration, of purpose, of joy that cannot be stolen by man. Do not despise this place of transition. The wilderness you feel lost in is not a prison. It is the passageway to the promised land. God often leads His people through dry, barren places before He takes them to places overflowing with goodness. Why? Because it is in the wilderness that the noise of the world dies down and the voice of God grows clear. It is in the silence of loss that His whispers can reach the depths of your soul, and it is in the emptiness that He can fill you with something greater than you've ever known. So to the one betrayed and broken, lift your head, not because the pain isn't real, but because your God is even more real. The same hands that allowed you to be wounded are the hands that will heal you. The same voice that called the world into existence is calling you forward. You are not being led in circles. You are not being forgotten. You are being positioned. And the next chapter is not just a continuation. It is a completely new season. Before a single word of betrayal was spoken behind your back, before a single look of deceit crossed their eyes, before the day arrived when you realized their loyalty was gone, God already knew. He is not caught off guard by the things that shock us. He is not scrambling to put together a plan when someone wounds you unexpectedly. The one who formed you in the secret place also foresaw the secret conversations, the hidden motives, the plans they made in silence while smiling to your fate, and yet He still allowed you to walk through it, not because He is indifferent to your pain, but because He is already weaving it into something that will bless you beyond comprehension. This is the unshakable truth. God's awareness is not passive. When He sees, He also moves, prepares, and positions. You may feel like this betrayal has left you defenseless, but heaven had already surrounded you long before the first wound was delivered. You were never without His covering, even in the moments when you felt abandoned. His eyes missed nothing, not the subtle change in their tone, not the sudden coldness in their heart, not the knife they placed in your back. And because He saw it, He also saw the way through it. In the days when you questioned, "Why didn't you stop it, God?" Understand this. Sometimes, in His wisdom, He allows the mask to fall so you can see who was truly walking with you and who was merely walking beside you for their own benefit. Without this unveiling, you might have continued to build your life around people whose loyalty was never real. And what would have happened when the stakes were even higher? What would have happened if God allowed them to stay in a place of influence over you when their heart was not for you? Betrayal has a way of revealing what you could not see on your own, and while that revelation is painful, it is also protection. God does not just watch over your soul, He guards your destiny. He saw this moment as a necessary shift, removing those who would have become a liability in the next chapter of your life. He is not only healing you from the wound, He is making sure you never walk into the future with the same chains that bound you in the past. And here is the comfort in this truth. The same God who saw the betrayal before it happened is the God who is shaping your healing before you even realize you're in it. Healing does not begin the moment you feel better. It begins the moment He decides you will rise again. Even in the thick of your grief, He is already planting restoration into your path. The betrayal is not the end, it is the setup for a divine intervention that was written before the pain even touched you. We often want God to take us straight from the wound to the restoration. We want Him to replace what was lost without allowing us to feel the emptiness. We want to bypass the breaking entirely. But in His divine wisdom, He rarely skips the process, because the breaking does something the building never could. It empties us of the false so we can be filled with the true. Breaking seasons are not evidence of God's absence. They are proof of His craftsmanship. A skilled builder will never build on a weak foundation. If the base is cracked, if the structure is unstable, if there are flaws that will cause collapse later, the builder will tear it down before he builds again. And in your life there were parts of your foundation, beliefs, attachments, dependencies, that could not remain if you were going to stand strong in the next season. God allowed the breaking so He could rebuild you on ground that will never give way again. This season may feel cruel because it strips you bare. It takes away people you thought would always be there. It dismantles dreams you thought were unshakable. But understand, God will never remove something without the intention of replacing it with something better. The breaking is a sacred reset. It is God's way of saying, you cannot carry this into where I am taking you. There is also humility in the breaking, not humiliation but humility, the posture of recognizing that you cannot hold yourself together without Him. When the walls of your life collapse, you learn that He is the wall that cannot be breached. When your own strength fails, you discover the strength of His arms around you. Breaking seasons strip away the illusion that you were ever holding your life together on your own. And then comes the paradox. The very pain that shattered you becomes the reason you are able to hold more joy later. Why? Because the breaking enlarges your capacity. It teaches you to cherish what you once took for granted. It deepens your ability to empathize with the pain of others. It matures your faith so that the blessings of the next season do not slip through careless fingers. God allows the breaking because He knows what the building will require. He knows the weight of the calling on your life. He knows the strength it will demand. And without the breaking, you would be walking into the next chapter with the fragile, untested parts of yourself still in place. The breaking is the refining fire, and when the building comes, you will not only stand, you will thrive, because the foundation will be unshakable. The wilderness is one of the most misunderstood seasons in a believer's life. When we find ourselves in a place where the familiar comforts are gone, where the voices of encouragement have grown silent, and where the path ahead is unclear, it's easy to assume we've done something wrong. We wonder if God is displeased, if somehow we have been sent into exile as punishment. But the wilderness is not God's rejection. It is His classroom. It is where He takes His children when He intends to prepare them for something greater than they've ever known. Throughout Scripture, we see that the wilderness was never wasted. Moses spent 40 years there before leading Israel out of Egypt. David fled into the wilderness before he became king. Even Jesus was led into the wilderness before stepping into His public ministry. Why? Because the wilderness removes distractions, strips away illusions, and confronts us with the reality of our dependence on God. It is there, in the quiet isolation, that He teaches us to recognize His voice without the interference of the crowd. In the wilderness, you learn to trust Him not for tomorrow's abundance, but for today's bread. It is a season of daily reliance. When everything is stripped back, when the noise fades, you discover how much you truly need Him. You stop relying on the opinions of others because the others aren't there. You stop leaning on the structures you built for yourself because they no longer stand. And what's left is the unshakable reality that God alone is your source. The wilderness also reshapes your vision. When life was comfortable, you may have prayed for small blessings, for survival, for just enough to get by. But in the wilderness, God expands your capacity to dream His dreams. He shows you glimpses of the promised land, not to tease you, but to give you the faith to keep walking when your surroundings don't match His promise. Yet the barrenness around you is not permanent. It is the backdrop against which His provision will shine all the more brightly. It is also a place of strengthening. In the wilderness, you face tests that refine you. You learn endurance when the journey stretches longer than expected. You learn resilience when the road is harder than you imagined. You learn the discipline of obedience when it would be easier to take shortcuts. These lessons are not punishments. They are the training ground for the blessings ahead. Without the strength you gain in the wilderness, the weight of the next season's calling could crush you. If you are in a wilderness now, do not mistake God's silence for His absence. He is nearer than ever, and every step you take in faith through this barren land is one step closer to the promise He has prepared for you. The wilderness is not where your story ends. It is where the next chapter begins. Tears have a language all their own. They carry prayers too deep for words, grief too heavy for sentences, and longings too vast for human expression. And here is the promise: not a single tear you have shed has been wasted. Every drop has fallen into the hands of the One who counts them, stores them, and waters the soil of your destiny with them. Psalm 204. We often think of loss as the end of something, an empty space that can never be filled again. But in the kingdom of God, loss is never the last chapter. It is a seed, and like every seed, it must first be buried before it can bring forth life. When something dear is taken from you, it feels like being lowered into the dark earth. You cannot see what is happening beneath the surface. You may think the story is over, but in God's economy, burial is the first step toward resurrection. The enemy intends for your loss to be permanent. He hopes the weight of grief will press you into despair. But God takes that very same loss and transforms it into the soil where your future will grow. What was meant to kill you becomes the very reason you bloom again. The betrayal that broke you becomes the testimony that will heal someone else. The season of loneliness that crushed you becomes the foundation for relationships built on truth and loyalty. Every tear you've cried over what was stolen is not just pain, it is planting. And every time you chose to keep believing, even with a shattered heart, you were watering that seed. God has a way of bringing life from places you thought were dead. He can cause beauty to rise from the ashes, joy to spring from mourning, and purpose to flow from your deepest wounds. Sometimes we don't recognize the new life right away. It begins quietly, like a small green shoot breaking through the soil. You may not even notice it at first because it's still fragile, still tender, but with time it grows. And one day, you realize the season that almost destroyed you was actually the season that planted the greatest blessings in your life. Loss is not God's way of taking without giving back. It is His way of exchanging what is temporary for what is eternal, what is shallow for what is deep, what is fragile for what is unbreakable. Every tear, every heartbreak, every loss, none of it is in vain. In His time, the seed will break open, and the new life will be so abundant that you will not even be able to compare it to what you lost. One of the hardest things you will ever do after betrayal is wait. Wait for answers. Wait for healing. Wait for God to move in a way that makes sense. The temptation is to rush the process, to try to fix the damage yourself, to find closure in your own way, to rebuild on your own timeline. But God's work is not bound by the urgency of our emotions. His timing is not delayed, it is deliberate. Every pause, every delay, every moment that feels like nothing is happening is actually a moment where everything is being aligned in ways you cannot yet see. Trusting God's timing requires surrender. It means admitting that He sees more than you do. From where you stand, you see only the immediate pain, the broken pieces scattered at your feet. From where He stands, He sees the entire picture, the past, the present, the future. He knows what needs to be healed in you before you step into the next chapter. He knows what doors must close before the right ones can open. He knows when your heart will be ready to receive, without fear of losing again. When the path is uncertain, our natural instinct is to create our own path. But if you move ahead before God's time, you may find yourself in a place you were never meant to be. And when you arrive too early in a place that was meant for later, it will not be able to hold you. The blessing will feel like a burden because it came before you were prepared for it. God's timing is not just about the right opportunity, it's about the right you. Think about the seed in the ground. If you dig it up too soon to see if it's growing, you will destroy it. Growth happens in the hidden place, in the unseen soil, and your healing works the same way. While you are waiting, God is working underground in the deepest parts of your life, restoring your strength, re-eliminating your heart, and removing anything that could threaten your future. You may not see it yet, but when the time is right, what He has been building in secret will be revealed in power. There will be days when the wait feels endless, when you cry out for God to act now, when you are tempted to believe nothing is changing. But the truth is, delay is often the space where God does His most important work. The wait humbles you. It teaches you dependence. It transforms your desires. It removes the last traces of what would have kept you bound. And when the appointed time comes, the doors will open so swiftly that you will realize the wait was never a waste. It was the preparation that made the blessing possible. A new season rarely announces itself with a trumpet blast. More often it begins quietly, with small, almost imperceptible changes that only a watchful heart will notice. You may still feel the weight of yesterday's pain, but in subtle ways, God begins to shift the atmosphere around you. What once felt suffocating starts to feel lighter. The things that once kept you awake at night no longer grip you with the same intensity. The wounds are still there, but they no longer define every waking moment. This is how a new season often begins, gradually, like the first light of dawn creeping over the horizon. Sometimes the first sign is peace. Not the peace that comes from having all the answers, but the peace that defies logic. A quiet assurance that you are in God's hands, even if you don't know what's next. You wake up one morning and realize you no longer feel the desperate need to control the outcome. The fear is still there in traces, but it's losing its grip. That's a sign your heart is being prepared for what's ahead. Another sign is when God begins removing your desire for what once held you. You stop yearning for the approval of those who betrayed you. You stop replaying old conversations, hoping for a different ending. You begin to lose the taste for what once enslaved you. This is not you becoming cold or bitter. It's God loosening the chains so you can walk into freedom. You may also notice new opportunities, small doors beginning to crack open. They may not be the grand breakthrough you imagined, but they are whispers from God saying, "I'm moving you forward." A conversation with a stranger, a job lead, a new friendship. These are not coincidences. They are pieces of a bigger puzzle He is assembling for your next season. Sometimes the sign is simply strength, waking up one day and realizing you can smile again without forcing it, or that you can think about the betrayal without feeling crushed, that you can pray for the one who hurt you, not because you excuse them, but because you have truly released them into God's hands. This strength is not of your own making. It is evidence that God has been at work deep within you. You may not yet see the full picture. You may still feel the shadows of the old season lingering around you. But those quiet shifts, peace in the storm, release from the past, open doors, renewed strength, are signs that the new season is already unfolding. And though you may not recognize it until later, these early signs are proof that God is leading you, step by step, into the restoration He has promised. When God speaks of restoration, He is not talking about merely returning you to the place you were before the pain. His nature is not to simply repair what was broken and hand it back as if nothing happened. His restoration always exceeds the original. He is a God who multiplies, who takes the ashes of your loss and turns them into something so beautiful that you can hardly recognize they came from the same place of destruction. The enemy's goal in betrayal is to diminish you, to leave you less than you were, to drain your strength, your faith, your hope. He intends for you to walk away limping, scarred, and unable to dream again. But God's promise flips that script entirely. The very areas where the enemy sought to rob you will be the very places God blesses you most abundantly. Where you were torn down, you will be built up stronger. Where you were emptied, you will be filled to overflowing. Scripture is full of this pattern. Job lost everything, his family, his wealth, his health, and yet the end of his life was more blessed than its beginning. Joseph was betrayed by his brothers, sold into slavery, imprisoned for crimes he didn't commit, yet rose to a position where he could save not only a nation, but the very brothers who wronged him. This is the heart of God in restoration. It is not just about replacing what you lost, but about elevating you to a place you never could have reached without the journey through the fire. There is something about the broken that God treasures. He does not discard it, He redeems it. And when He redeems it, He does so extravagantly. This is why your restoration will not be an equal exchange. It will be an upgrade. The relationships that come will be deeper, more loyal, and God-ordained. The opportunities that arise will be greater than the ones you thought you missed. The joy you will feel will be richer, because it will have been born from the soil of sorrow. God's restoration also carries a vindication, not a petty, human sort of revenge, but a divine demonstration that His hand has been on you all along. When He restores, those who watched your fall will also witness your rising. They will see that what was meant to break you only positioned you for a greater glory. And while this may not be the goal of restoration, it is often one of its byproducts. Your life becomes a testimony not only to your resilience, but to the faithfulness of God. It's important to remember that His restoration is not limited to material things. Sometimes the most profound restoration happens inside you. The peace you will walk in after this storm will be far greater than the peace you had before. The faith you will carry will be unshakable because it was forged in the furnace of affliction. The wisdom you will gain will guide your steps for the rest of your life, protecting you from future wounds. When you step into this season of restoration, you will not simply be getting back to normal. You will be stepping into a new normal, one where the lessons of the past empower you, where the blessings of God surround you, and where the scars you carry are no longer reminders of pain, but proof of survival. This is the promise. What is ahead will not only match what was lost, it will surpass it in every way. To the one betrayed and broken, you must understand this. What has happened to you is not the end of your story. The betrayal, the loss, the nights of unanswered questions were not the closing chapter, but the turning of a page. You have been walking through a valley, but a valley is not a destination. It is a passage. And on the other side of this passage, there is a table prepared for you by the very God who has walked beside you every step of the way. Every tear you have cried has been counted. Every wound you've endured has been seen. Every injustice you've faced has been recorded in heaven. And the God who is both just and merciful is not going to leave you in this place. He is leading you, step by step, moment by moment, into a season where the pieces of your life will not only come back together, but form something more beautiful than you could have imagined. When you look back, you will see that nothing was wasted. The breaking made room for the building. The wilderness taught you to hear His voice. The waiting strengthened your faith. The small signs gave you hope. And the restoration, when it comes, will leave you in awe, not of your own resilience, but of His faithfulness. So stand, even if you feel weak. Walk, even if you cannot see the full path. Trust, even when your heart trembles, because the God who brought you this far is the same God who will finish what He started. Your betrayal will not define you. Your brokenness will not destroy you, and your future will not be stolen. A new season is not just coming. It has already begun. And when it unfolds in full, you will know that it was worth every step through the storm.